My sister stood at the front door of our mother's estate, the house I'd grown up in, the house I'd spent 3 years renovating with my own money, and screamed in my face, "Get out. You have no inheritance here. Mother left everything to me, and there's nothing you can do about it." She was holding the will in her hand like a weapon, waving it in front of me, her face twisted with triumphant malice. She thought she'd won. She thought manipulating our dying mother into changing the will had secured her the entire $5 million estate. She thought I'd walk away defeated, crying, broken. But here's what my sister Lindsay didn't know: I had copies of her police records. I had documentation of felonies she'd committed and covered up. I had evidence that would not only void that fraudulent will but send her to prison. And as I stood there on that porch, listening to her scream at me to leave, I smiled. Because I'd been waiting for this moment for 6 months. I'd been preparing for this legal reveal while she thought she was so clever. And 1 hour later, when my lawyer walked into that estate with a police officer and a court order, when Lindsay's face went from smug satisfaction to pale terror, when the will was declared void and she was arrested, that was the sweetest moment of justice I've ever experienced. I'm Lena, and this is the story of how my criminal sister tried to steal my inheritance and how I used the law to destroy her completely. Let me take you back 18 months before that confrontation, because you need to understand the full scope of Lindsay's manipulation to appreciate how thoroughly I dismantled her scheme. Our mother had been diagnosed with advanced dementia. The decline was rapid and devastating. 1 month she was independent and sharp, the next she was confused about where she was, who we were, what year it was. I lived 2 hours away but immediately rearranged my life to be there. I moved into the estate temporarily, managed her medical care, hired nurses, handled all her finances, made sure she was comfortable and safe. It was exhausting, heartbreaking work watching my mother's mind deteriorate. Lindsay lived 20 minutes away. She visited maybe once a month, always briefly, always with excuses about being busy with work and her family. She'd stay for 30 minutes, make a show of being the devoted daughter, then disappear again. But I didn't resent her absence initially. I understood that watching a parent decline is painful, that some people can't handle it. I was just focused on making sure Mom had the best care possible. The estate was substantial. Our father had been a successful businessman, and when he died 10 years earlier, he'd left everything to Mom. $5 million in assets, the house, investments, savings. Mom's will had always split everything 50-50 between Lindsay and me. Fair, simple, clear. Then 6 months before Mom died, something changed. Lindsay suddenly started visiting more often. Not to help with care or spend time with Mom, but to have private conversations with her. Conversations she'd specifically ask me to leave the room for. I thought maybe she was finally stepping up, having those difficult end-of-life discussions with Mom. I was actually relieved she was engaging. What I didn't know was that she was poisoning Mom against me. Using Mom's confusion and memory issues to plant lies. Telling her I was stealing money from her accounts. Claiming I was trying to put her in a nursing home against her will. Suggesting I was abusive to the nursing staff and making Mom's care worse. All lies. Vicious, calculated lies told to a woman whose mind couldn't distinguish truth from fiction anymore. Lindsay also brought a lawyer to one of these visits. Had Mom sign a new will, leaving everything to Lindsay. Mom was so confused by that point she probably didn't even understand what she was signing. But Lindsay didn't care. She had her document. I found out about the new will 2 weeks after Mom died. Lindsay called me after the funeral, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "Lena, I need to tell you something difficult. Mom changed her will before she died. She left everything to me. I think she was upset with you for some reason. I'm so sorry." The shock was physical. What? That's not possible. We were supposed to split everything. I know, but she made this decision. It's legal and binding. I'll send you a copy. When the copy arrived, I saw it had been signed just 4 months before Mom died, when her dementia was severe, when she could barely remember my name some days. And it wasn't notarized by our family lawyer who'd handled all of Mom's legal affairs for decades. It was notarized by someone I'd never heard of. The rage I felt was volcanic. Lindsay had manipulated our dying mother, exploited her mental illness, and stolen my inheritance. And she thought she'd gotten away with it. I hired a lawyer immediately. Explained the situation, the dementia, the sudden will change, the suspicious circumstances. My lawyer said we could contest it based on Mom's mental state at the time of signing, but it would be a long, expensive legal battle with no guarantee of success. Is there anything else? He asked. Any other leverage you might have against your sister? And that's when I remembered something I'd discovered years ago. Something Lindsay thought was buried and forgotten. 10 years earlier, I'd been helping Mom organize her files when I found a folder labeled Lindsay Legal Issues. Inside were police reports, court documents, and records of Lindsay's arrest and conviction for embezzlement and fraud. 15 years ago, Lindsay had worked as an accountant for a small business. She'd been systematically stealing from the company, falsifying records, embezzling over $200,000. She was caught, arrested, convicted of felony fraud and embezzlement, and sentenced to 3 years probation and restitution. Mom and Dad had covered it up. Paid the restitution, hired expensive lawyers who kept it out of the news, helped Lindsay rebuild her life and reputation. Most people, including her current employer and even her husband, didn't know about her criminal past. I'd found those documents by accident and confronted Mom about it at the time. She'd begged me not to tell anyone, said Lindsay had made a mistake but deserved a second chance. I'd agreed to keep it quiet because I loved my sister and believed in redemption. But that was before she stole my inheritance. I told my lawyer about the criminal record. His eyes lit up. That's it. That's what we need. In this state, there's a provision in estate law that prohibits anyone convicted of certain felonies from inheriting from someone they may have defrauded or manipulated. If we can prove she used fraud or undue influence to get your mother to change the will, and she has a history of fraud convictions, we can void the entire document. Can we prove undue influence? With her dementia diagnosis and the timing of the will change? Yes. Combined with her criminal history of fraud? We have a strong case. He filed the legal motion immediately. Lindsay was served with papers challenging the will and notifying her that her criminal record was being entered as evidence. Her response was predictable. She called me screaming. How dare you drag up my past? That was 15 years ago. I paid my debt. You're trying to destroy me out of spite. I'm trying to get what Mom actually wanted before you manipulated her, I said coldly. You exploited a woman with dementia to steal from her daughter. That's elder abuse and fraud. Your criminal history shows a pattern of exactly this behavior. You can't prove anything. I can prove you had her change the will when she was mentally incompetent. I can prove you visited her specifically to have private conversations right before the will was changed. I can prove you brought a lawyer she'd never used before. And I can prove you have a felony conviction for fraud and embezzlement. That's more than enough. She hung up on me. But I knew she was panicking. Over the next 3 months, the legal process unfolded. Lindsay fought it viciously, claiming the will was legitimate, that Mom was mentally sound, that my allegations were false. But my lawyer was thorough. We gathered medical records documenting Mom's dementia progression. We deposed the nurses who'd cared for her, who testified she'd been severely confused during the time period when the will was changed. We obtained testimony from Mom's longtime lawyer who said he would never have let her sign a new will in her mental state. And we presented Lindsay's criminal record. The police reports, the court documents, the conviction for felony fraud. The pattern of behavior was undeniable. The court scheduled a hearing to determine the validity of the will. Lindsay showed up with her lawyer, still confident she could win. She dressed carefully, playing the part of the grieving daughter just trying to honor her mother's wishes. I showed up with boxes of evidence and a determination to burn her entire scheme to the ground. The hearing took 4 hours. My lawyer presented our case methodically. The medical evidence of dementia. The testimony about Mom's confusion. The suspicious timing and circumstances of the will change. And finally, Lindsay's criminal history and the pattern it established. Lindsay's lawyer tried to argue that her past was irrelevant, that she'd paid her debt to society, that this was just a vindictive sister trying to use old mistakes against her. But my lawyer demolished that defense. This isn't about punishment for past crimes. This is about a pattern of fraudulent behavior. Mrs. Lindsay Morrison was convicted of defrauding her employer by manipulating financial documents. Now she's accused of defrauding her sister by manipulating a mentally incompetent woman into changing her will. The pattern is identical. The court must consider this history when determining whether undue influence occurred. The judge took a week to make his ruling. When the decision came, it was everything I'd hoped for. The will was declared void due to undue influence exercised against a mentally incompetent person. Lindsay was ordered to return all assets from the estate immediately. And the judge went further. He referred the case to the prosecutor's office for potential criminal charges of elder abuse and fraud. Lindsay called me that night, crying and begging. "Lena, please. Please drop this. I'll split the estate with you like the original will said. Just make the criminal investigation go away." "No. Please. They're talking about charging me with felonies. I could go to prison. My husband will leave me, I'll lose my job, my kids will be humiliated." "You should have thought about that before you exploited our dying mother. I made a mistake. I'm sorry. You made a choice. A calculated, deliberate choice to abuse a vulnerable woman for money. Just like you made a choice 15 years ago to steal from your employer. You're not sorry you did it. You're sorry you got caught. I can't go to prison. Then you should have been a better person." I hung up. And I meant every word. Right now, thousands of people are watching this video, but most of you won't hit subscribe. You'll watch someone share their deepest pain and betrayal, consume their story for entertainment, and then scroll away without even clicking a button. If you can't take 2 seconds to subscribe after hearing what I went through, after watching me expose my family trauma for your benefit, then maybe ask yourself what that says about you. But for those of you who actually care about supporting people who share their truth, the subscribe button is right there. The prosecutor did file charges. Elder abuse, fraud, and attempted theft. Lindsay hired expensive lawyers and tried to fight it, but the evidence was overwhelming. She'd visited a mentally incompetent woman, isolated her from her primary caregiver, and manipulated her into signing legal documents that benefited Lindsay financially. That's textbook elder abuse. She eventually took a plea deal. 18 months in prison, 5 years probation, and permanent forfeiture of any claim to Mom's estate. She was also required to issue a public apology and acknowledgement of her crimes. Her husband did leave her. Her employer fired her when the conviction became public. Her reputation was destroyed. Some family members said I went too far. That sending my own sister to prison over an inheritance was cruel and vindictive. That I should have just split the money and moved on. But they didn't understand. This wasn't about money. This was about justice for my mother. Lindsay had abused a vulnerable woman, exploited her illness, and tried to steal from her other child. She deserved to face consequences. The day Lindsay was sentenced, I sat in the courtroom and watched her cry as the judge handed down her prison term. I felt no satisfaction, but I felt no guilt either. She'd made her choices. Now she was living with them. The estate was settled according to Mom's original will. Everything split 50-50. I received my $2.5 million inheritance. Lindsay's half was placed in a trust for her children, which she couldn't access. I used part of my inheritance to donate to dementia research and elder abuse prevention organizations. Mom would have liked that. The rest I invested carefully, building financial security for myself and my own family. Lindsay served her full sentence. No early release. When she got out, she tried to contact me once. A letter saying she'd found religion in prison, that she was truly sorry, that she wanted to rebuild our relationship. I didn't respond. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. She'd shown me exactly who she was, someone willing to abuse our dying mother for money. I couldn't forget that. I wouldn't forget that. Years later, I ran into one of her former friends who told me Lindsay was working as a cashier at a grocery store, struggling to make ends meet with her felony record, making it impossible to get better employment. The friend seemed to expect me to feel bad for her. I didn't. You make your choices, you live with the consequences. Lindsay chose fraud and elder abuse. The consequences were hers to bear. Some people think I'm cold for not forgiving her. For not giving her another chance. For sending her to prison. But those people didn't watch their sister manipulate their dying mother. They didn't see the smug satisfaction on Lindsay's face when she thought she'd stolen everything. They didn't feel the violation of having someone you're supposed to trust betray you in the most fundamental way. Forgiveness is earned through genuine remorse and changed behavior. Lindsay has shown neither. Her apologies came only after she faced consequences, only after she lost everything. That's not real remorse. That's regret at being caught. I protected my mother's actual wishes. I ensured justice was served. I made sure Lindsay couldn't victimize anyone else. And I did it all using the legal system and evidence of her own criminal behavior. The inheritance I received allows me to live comfortably, to support causes I care about, to provide for my family. Money that Lindsay tried to steal through manipulation and fraud. Money that now funds elder abuse prevention programs and dementia research instead of rewarding a criminal. Looking back, I don't regret a single decision I made. From hiring the lawyer to presenting the criminal evidence to supporting the prosecution. Lindsay created every bit of her own destruction through her choices. I just made sure those choices had consequences. That day when she screamed at me to get out of the estate, when she waved that fraudulent will in my face, when she thought she'd won, she had no idea what was coming. She thought I'd just accept being disinherited, that I'd cry and leave and let her steal everything. She didn't know I'd been quietly gathering evidence. She didn't know I'd found her criminal records. She didn't know I'd been preparing a legal strategy that would not only void her will but send her to prison. Her arrogance was her downfall. She underestimated me completely. Thought I was weak, thought I'd back down, thought I'd prioritize keeping family peace over pursuing justice. She was wrong on every count. When my lawyer walked into that estate with the court order voiding the will, when the police officer arrested Lindsay for elder abuse and fraud, when her face went from triumph to terror in seconds, that moment was worth every dollar I spent on legal fees. Justice isn't always loud and dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet and methodical. Gathering evidence, building a case, using the legal system exactly as it's designed to be used. Making sure criminals face consequences for their crimes. Lindsay thought she could manipulate a vulnerable woman and get away with it because I wouldn't fight back. She was wrong. I fought back with every tool at my disposal. And I won. The will was voided. The inheritance was restored to its proper distribution. Lindsay went to prison. And I got justice for my mother and myself. That's not revenge. That's accountability. And it was long overdue. My mother deserved better than to be exploited in her final months. She deserved to have her wishes respected, not manipulated by a criminal daughter who saw her illness as an opportunity. I made sure she got that respect, even after her death. I made sure her estate went where she'd always intended it to go. I made sure the person who'd abused her faced consequences. And I'd do it all again without hesitation. Because family doesn't mean accepting abuse. It doesn't mean letting criminal behavior slide. It doesn't mean protecting people who hurt you just because you share DNA. Family should mean trust, respect, honesty. When those things are absent, when someone violates them as fundamentally as Lindsay did, then the family bond is already broken. I just acknowledged that reality and acted accordingly. I built a good life with my inheritance. I've honored my mother's memory through charitable work and financial security for my own family. I've ensured that Lindsay's crime didn't benefit her in any way. That's what justice looks like. Not perfect, not always satisfying, but real and earned. My name is Lena. My sister tried to steal my inheritance by manipulating our dying mother, and I used her criminal record to void the will and send her to prison. I don't feel guilty. I feel proud of standing up for what was right. And if you're in a similar situation, if someone in your family is trying to manipulate or steal or abuse, know that you have power. You have legal options. You have the right to fight back and demand accountability. Don't let anyone tell you to keep the peace at the expense of justice. Don't let anyone convince you that family means accepting criminal behavior. Stand up. Fight back. Use every tool available. You deserve justice. Your loved ones who've been victimized deserve justice. And the criminals deserve consequences, regardless of whether you share their last name. Here's what really gets me about this platform: I just shared the most painful betrayal of my life, exposed my family's darkest secrets, relived the trauma of watching my sister abuse our dying mother. Also, you could hear this story. And yet most of you watching right now won't even leave a comment. You'll consume my pain, get the satisfaction of seeing justice served, and then disappear without even acknowledging you were here. If hearing about someone sending their own sister to prison doesn't move you enough to type a few words of support or share your own experience, I don't know what will. But maybe that's just who we are now, consumers of other people's trauma who can't be bothered to engage. For those of you who do care enough to comment and share your own stories of family betrayal, thank you. You're the reason I'm willing to share this. Now let me hear from you. Have you dealt with family members trying to steal inheritance? Have you had to make the impossible choice between family loyalty and justice? Drop a comment below sharing your experience, because your story might help someone else who's facing similar betrayal. And subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications, because I'll continue sharing stories about fighting family fraud, protecting elderly parents from abuse, and making sure criminals face consequences even when they're related to you. These stories are for everyone who's been told to forgive unforgivable things, everyone who's been pressured to accept abuse in the name of family, everyone who knows that real love includes accountability. You're not wrong for pursuing justice against family members who commit crimes. You're not cruel for refusing to protect people who hurt you. You're strong for standing up when it would be easier to stay silent. This is Lena, reminding you that inheritance law exists to protect vulnerable people, criminal records exist for a reason, and sometimes the most loving thing you can do for a deceased parent is ensure their actual wishes are honored, not the manipulated version a criminal created.